Crime Watch, more than a dozen Pueblo gang members are now in prison after a 5-year-long investigation.
The FBI and United States Attorney's Office, alongside local law enforcement, announced the results of a crackdown on a gang they say was responsible for a whole lot of violence in the city. Natalie Chuck is live from the Pueblo Police Department tonight. And Natalie, you spoke with one man who says this kind of investigation brings back some painful memories.
Yeah, Diane Allison, Steven Rodriguez is one of many people here in Pueblo brought up in a family with gang ties that date back decades. And he says this is a problem that is really just ingrained in the community. And while he does agree that this big investigation spanning multiple agencies is important, he says the biggest thing that will help fix this problem is taking care of the kids who live here.
I could have been locked up for decades or been killed or killed somebody.
When Steven Rodriguez reflects on his childhood in Pueblo, his memories look a lot different than most.
Everybody was into drugs and into fighting. We fought a lot and everything.
As someone raised in a family of gang members, Rodriguez never knew a lifestyle outside of crime and violence until he decided in the 1970s enough was enough.
You start thinking how many times you've missed being killed, how many times you could have been in certain situations where you end up in prison for your whole life, and you wake up, you have children, and you don't want that for your children.
Rodriguez is the exception, now living on the other side of society, knowing most of his loved ones haven't walked away from the gang, and probably never will.
There's people that you love and you care about, and it's just like, what do I do? And you can't do nothing. It's too late then. It's too late, but it's not too late for us to do something now.
Both federal and local law enforcement agencies proved they are trying to do something, announcing that a 5-year investigation put over a dozen members of one specific gang behind bars.
If I was a gang member in Pueblo right now, it'd be a good time to be nervous.
The Pueblo Police Department says the gang that was the target of this investigation accounted for 16% of crimes, including murder, assault, drug possession or distribution, and weapons charges in the city back in 2016. In 2021, that number dropped to less than 2.5%.
I do agree with the concept that they're, take the head off and it'll affect everybody down. But you got young people ready to step up to fill them voids.
That's where Rodriguez says the solution starts, by taking care of Pueblo's kids.
Get these young people off the street and out of the hands of people that want to just use them for their ill-gotten gains.
And while law enforcement continues investigating gang violence in the city, Rodriguez says he wants to see city leaders step up and fund programs for kids that will help keep their hands away from crime before they get there. Reporting in Pueblo, Natalie Chuck, News 5.
Welcome back to our show. I just realized I only need 29 more people to subscribe in order to hit the 24,000 mark. So please consider subscribing to this channel if you have not already done so, and please share it with your friends. Another group, GRASP, Gang Rescue and Support Project, was started in Denver by a former Inca boy named Jesse Chavez. They were established in 1991 after a tragic drive-by shooting death of a teen. I'm not sure how some people got the idea that I said GRASP was a gang in my last video. However, they did have former gang members that were involved with that group. It is a nonprofit organization and has helped many kids to better futures via one-on-one mentoring. Francisco Cisco Gallardo appeared on Mile High Killers after his gang career and went to work for GRASP. He and Michelle McDaniel presented for me a few years back in Pueblo. Michelle is still with this great program as the AIM program manager and community outreach person, and spoke for me on my female gang expert panel a few years ago. That episode is still available on this channel if you're interested in the subject of female gang members and associates. Cisco moved out to the LA area and is still working with intervention programs out there. Most of what I learned about Colorado street and prison gangs was from guys like Ben Griego, Daryl Vigil, Leonard Skin Tight Vigil, and Steve Lucero, whom were Pueblo, Colorado raised, and all of whom were involved with the Colorado Sting, or the State Security Threat Intelligence Network Group. This great association is still around today, and I taught a few times for them in the past. I was also schooled on the local culture from guys like David Arteaga, also Pueblo raised, who moved to Washington State in the 1970s. David became the MC for our local Fiestas Patrias for many years at the Seattle Center, where the Space Needle was located, and he was also a local radio DJ. He worked at the King County Jail as a personal recognizance screener and was also my TAC officer at the Washington Criminal Justice Training Center after I left the California Department of Corrections New Folsom Prison and got a job back in my hometown at the Seattle Jail. David also taught a Spanish for law enforcement course there and did the cultural awareness piece for the Correctional Officer Academy for many years. David fought very hard for me when a certain mock scenes tester tried to fail me. I won't get into all the details of why I think that occurred, but if you're interested, it is in my book, The Life and Times of About the Local. Anyways, when I was president of the Washington Coalition of Hispanics in Law Enforcement, we gave David an award for his dedication to the criminal justice system and to our community. As I did a couple of Colorado gang videos in the summer of 2022, I will try not to repeat too much of the information that is already in those, and focus mainly on some corrections, clarifications, and updates on gang issues over the past few years or so in the state of Colorado. As I stated in those videos, per Ben Griego, in the 1970s, the Colorado's DOC system was split racially, with about 50% of the inmates being white and about 30% being Hispanic and the remainder black or others. Since that time, the Hispanic ratio has grown quite a bit. Most of the prison incidents back then were racially motivated, with no one group or prison gang that dominated the system. But as the California gangsters started coming up in the 1980s, and after a review of possible gang activity within the system, Colorado DOC officials soon realized that there were a lot of gangs already operating out on the streets who were coming into the system, and a gang monitoring program was implemented, with each facility with dedicated gang investigators. In the mid-1990s, the term street gang and prison gangs was changed to security threat groups to reflect the terminology used by the National Major Gang Task Force. During this same time frame, Colorado Sting was developed in an effort to identify STG members in county jails prior to them hitting the prison system so they could get a head start on their activities. Intelligence was streamlined to communicate faster and better when sharing information from both inside and outside of prisons and jails. This also included communication with police officers and police gang units. Johnny Quick Salazar was a Serrano from Pueblo's Eastside Dukes / Los Carnales gang. He became a Duke, as did his younger brother, Mark Yogi Salazar. I interviewed Mark on my show and talked about his local gang intervention program that he implemented in Pueblo many years later. In 2022, 13 Pueblo gang members were prosecuted at the federal level, as well as 12 of those gang members facing state charges. The majority of the offenders were facing drug-related charges, but one was sentenced to 32 years in prison after pleading guilty to the 2019 murder of Floyd Robinson near Bessemer Park. According to Pueblo PD, members of the Latin Aces were responsible for 16% of the murder, assault, narcotics, distribution, and weapons charges in Pueblo in 2016. They were hit hard by the cops, and by 2021, they were responsible for less than 2.5% of those crimes. They are still there, though, and have been active on the Lower East Side for many years, and have been at war with the Bessemer Spruce Locals 13 towards the southern end of Interstate 25 that runs through the city. I believe the Aces there are connected to the Aces up in Denver. There are some 18th Street gang members in Pueblo, which is a transnational gang. I understand they mostly operate around the Belmont area of Pueblo. And in March 2025, an MS member with a long criminal record, Billy Soto, was found to be responsible for ambushing and shooting 3 cops in Pueblo. He had been out on bail for 3 prior felonies and was wanted on an attempted murder charge that occurred at a local complex the previous month when he shot some 80 shots from a rifle at local cops. Pueblo Police Chief Chris Noller blasted soft on crime policies that allowed a gangster like this to roam free despite 14 prior felony arrests. This time, however, Soto was shot and killed when the cops returned fire. I'm not sure what the current estimates are today, and nationwide it has been a lot harder to guess on fairly accurate numbers for this series because so many gang databases, both at the police level and corrections level, have been shut down. But in 2017, police estimated that there were at least 14,000 7,000 gang members in Denver alone, affiliated with some 220 gangs. The north side of Denver has had criminal activity in it for many years and was once controlled by La Cosa Nostra family called the Smaldoni family. And some say that a gang called Northside Mafia, when it started, had both Mexicans and Italians in it. Northside Mafia started in the mid-1980s. Some say 1986 to be exact. And one name I left out of my last video was an individual named Mike Fresco, affiliated with NSM. Evidently, Mike Fresco was shot in the back by some Inca boys, and this started a war. The Inca boys were said to have started in the 1970s by Oscar Jimenez around 5th and Inca, their home base. And I heard that at one time they had a lot of Native Americans in their clique. They were a powerhouse gang in the 1970s through early 1990s, but evidently made too many enemies. By the mid-1990s, when they went to the pen, they would get rushed by the Gallant Knights Insane. There was a rumor that the Incas were trying to make a comeback. There are still a few of them around, but not very many youngsters today. Understand that a couple of the older Incas, veteranos, still around, may claim Los Primer Padres, a prison gang that I'll talk about here later. In 2004, Denver PD started cracking down on the Northside Mafia after Edgar Alvarado was shot 3 times and killed in December 2003. NSM member Gabriel Solano was the suspect and was shot by Denver PD when he tried to elude arrest to an apartment. But Solano ended up IDing fellow gang member Angelo Lovato as being the shooter in the death of Edgar Alvarado, which some say gave the gang a rat jacket. NSM never had a vertical structure. Their power always came from money generated through drug sales. Other smaller clicas started using the identifier NSM, and their reputation grew by 1992. Some people said that the gang was put underneath the Norteño banner recently, after several were sent to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But others say this is just not true. They state that some NSMs claim Norte, and some are strictly just NSM. I believe they are still enemies of the Sureños, like Norteños are, but don't always claim Norte in the streets. When the History Channel aired Mile High Killers on Gangland, some didn't like it, but most of the Northside Mafia felt validated to get their name out on national TV. Let me know what you think in the comment section. When he was 17, Michael Pico Garcia did something so terrible that a Denver judge gave him 2 life sentences without the hope of parole. Soon, Colorado DOC stated that Garcia was stabbed with a sharpened pencil at the Colorado State Pen, but others say those reports were wrong, that he was beaten to death by anywhere between 6 to 9 inmates. This assault and murder occurred in 1992, and the suspects were Gallant Knights Insane, also known as Gangster Killing Incas, because supposedly they killed so many Incas in their war with them. Understand that Pico was the first Northsider to become a GKI, so evidently did something to run afoul of that gang, if I understand what I was told correctly. 1986 or 87, depending on who you talk to, is when Gallant Knights Insane started. Many GKI would hang out on 9th and Lippian, as depicted in a lot of their tattoos. Some of the OGs were Mike Psycho Valenzuela, Jimmy Jimbo Valenzuela, Tino Mendez, Johnny G. Estrada, Drew Gutierrez, and Ninja Cervantes, as well as Gregorio Ramirez, aka Westside. The GKIs grew in numbers as they entered the Department of Corrections and continued to recruit. Somebody posted that I forgot to mention Oldies 13, who center around 37th Avenue, and that they get along with 27th Street, who I believe are Bloods. Let me know if that is correct. I really didn't mention traditional, predominantly black gangs like Crips and Bloods or Gangster Disciples in my Colorado Street Gangs video. There are several prominently homegrown majority Hispanic blood gangs. According to former classification chief, gang expert, and associate warden Daryl Vigil, the Deuces go way back to at least the 1990s. Today, the Deuce Sevens are still active in Denver and are a factor in prison. They can function in general population with no problem, never converted to Norteños like some thought they might. Like I said, Denver gangs don't always follow the national norms. An Edgar haircut, skinny jeans with rips in them, and pants worn down below the butt crack is common these days, something that OG veterano Chicano gangs would never do. Westside Crenshaw Mafia is a gang that started in the greater LA area, but set up in Denver around 1982, and has been active for many years in the state, and is multi-ethnic as seen in these pictures. They were set up in the Park Hill and West Ridge hoods during the crack cocaine epidemic, and still have connections to the LA set. There are also Rolling 20 Outlaw Bloods, some Treetop Pyrus, and Lincoln Park Pyrus, who wear green like the Limehood Pyrus in Compton do. New Year's Day 2007, the drive-by shooting of Broncos cornerback Derek Williams by members of the Trey Crips, an Eastside Denver gang, brought about a lot of publicity. The Crips in the city have several subsets, such as Trey Deuce, Trey Full, 3-5 Outlaws, and the Trey Gangster Crips. Denver also has Rollin' 30 and Rollin' 60s Crips, as well as several other sets. The Cheeky 30 Gangster Crips are said to be all Mexican, again, bucking the California norms. They beef with Eastside Oldies, but some also beef with the Park Hill Bloods. It seems to me like there are a lot of hybrid gangs in Denver these days. For instance, last year, in 2025, leaders of 2 violent Colorado gangs pled guilty to murder and organized crime. Police identified Philip Baca Sr. as the leader of the Few But Plenty Street Gang. And between January 2020 and March 2022, they were involved in at least 14 shootings, mostly drive-bys, that targeted their rivals on the west side of Denver. Another gang leader, Angel Taz Espinosa, was considered to be the number one in Too Damn Smooth. And from June 2019 to March 2023, they committed at least 18 shootings. Most of their actions were against rival gang members, but both gangs also hit innocent victims who were caught up in the crossfire or were misidentified as being enemies. As Aurora PD officer Andy Eways reports, the city has Barrio Aurora 13, Lomas in the Ruby Hill area, White Fence, and Florencia 13. All Sureños continue to spread throughout the entire state. Aurora also has some Crips and Bloods, as well as some gangster disciples. There are some MS-13 members found in Colorado. In 2023, Manuel Rivera Rivas was sentenced to 6 years in Colorado State Prison for murder, and 16 other members of this gang were also indicted, with 3 members being sentenced to life in prison. 31-year-old Mauricio Alvarado Vasquez was one of them. He was convicted for his role in multiple murders and attempted murders from 2019 to 2020, including the killing of Aurora woman, Vicky Salvadora de Dios, who was stabbed 20 times. Her body was discovered in the back seat of her car that was parked on Interstate 225 and had been set on fire. By the way, Andy Eways and I wrote a book called Mara Salvatrucha, 18th Street and Gangs Across America, which focuses on other Sureño gangs. The book is still available on Police and Fire Publishing. As far as Norteños, there has been some reach from the Norteño strongholds of Gilroy, Salinas, and San Jose, California, to the Denver area. There are some Norteños in Denver. That I know for a fact. I interviewed both this guy and his brother, who are from Denver. Did time in Calipas and Washington State, and they are blasted with Huelga Birds, Norte 14, and other Norteño identifiers. They were identified by multiple law enforcement officers and myself as being Northern Structure, who functioned under the Nuestra Familia prison gang. Some state that they do not, but I know for a fact Robert Beto, a.k.a. Bobby, a.k.a. Colombo, Baron de Sacra, did 30 years in the Colorado DOC system from the late 1970s to early 2000s, and he knew many of the original Chicano gang members in the state. He is a longtime Nuestra Familia member who was validated way back in 1974 in the California Department of Corrections. After he did his Colorado DOC stint, he returned to the California Department of Corrections in 2009 and is still housed there, being very influential, even with being an old man at 71 years old. In southern Adams County in Colorado, Norteños have been identified also, and there is a heavy Norteño influence in the Fort Joaquin area of Greeley, Colorado, in the northern part of the state. There are some Sureños in Greeley, Colorado, like the Baby Gangster Sureños, Los Vatos 13, Southside Criminals, and others. Understand there are also some Norteños in Fort Collins, as well as some Sureño. Tren de Aragua has been classified as a prison gang since they started in the Tocoron prison in Venezuela, which functioned at the time as the gang's de facto headquarters. Some of the TDA escaped from that prison and they expanded out in the streets of Venezuela and throughout Central America, then came in the last few years to the United States during the refugee crisis. There has been some TDA members found in Colorado, specifically in Denver, where I understand many of them then moved over to Aurora. According to informants, Los Primer Padres started at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility and are still active. They use the San Diego Padres logo, and their recognized founder was Manuel Gamboa. In my last video, some state that they were a protected custody gang, but I know many of them that were able to walk on general population yards with no problems. They have been the target of several investigations. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are 33 active extremist groups operating in Colorado, but not all of them can be classified as white hate groups or supreme white power. If you want some good insight to some of them, you could check out my friend Ron Stallworth's book, Black Klansman, later made into a movie by Spike Lee. starring John David Washington, Denzel's son, as Ron, and Adam Driver for his supporting role as Ron's partner in a Colorado Springs PD undercover operation that made Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke look like a fool. The 211 gang was started in the Denver County Jail in 1995 to protect white inmates from Chicano and black gangs. As stated in my last video, one of their members, Evan Ebel, killed Colorado Department of Corrections Director Tom Clements back in 2013. In 2024, the state of Colorado paid $1 million to settle a lawsuit brought about by a state prisoner who states he was stalked, assaulted, and almost killed by 211 gang members. That inmate, John Sonorski, states that Colorado DOC officials not only ignored documented threats against him, but deliberately put him in harm's way, housing him with known associates of the 211 gang. I saw that not too long ago, there were some rumors posted online that the Hells Angels were going to start patrolling Aurora, Colorado to keep the Tren de Aragua gang out of town, but that turned out to be totally bogus. I talked about some of the outlaw motorcycle gangs operating in Colorado in a recent video. Those are mainly the Sons of Silence, whose home state is Colorado, Hells Angels, and Mongols. But the Hells Angels and Mongols recently battled in Denver, whereby 10 Mongols MC members were arrested for the homicide of an HA member, with 2 other HAs being wounded. The Banditos MC are also present in the state in the past, and I've heard word that the Pagans are also now in the state, with their very active and aggressive recruiting and expansion strategy outside of their East Coast stronghold as part of their Blue Wave campaign. We should never forget that in Colorado and most states, 90% of offenders will get out at some point and become our neighbors. We should help them transition back to the community, but we should ensure that they have the job skills, education skills, and life skills to be successful, as well as a good support network. Some offenders at the Sterling Correctional Facility recently took it upon themselves to create a great video talking about what normal means to them, and it is very inspiring to see their passion on this subject.
Interacting with the volunteers here at Sterling Correctional Facility within the church gives us a sense of normalization. Interacting with them makes us feel loved and cared for.
I've been down for about 20 years, and for about 18 of those years, I found myself not really interacting or engaging with women. I didn't realize what that was doing to me and how it affected my psychological thinking and my thought process. But after being on the podcast and working with females and being a part of a team where we could accomplish something that was constructive, so now I think I'm getting back to what we might call normalcy and just being able to, get along and communicate with not just males but also females, and so that's part of normalcy.
So I belong to a group here in Sterling, and one of the things that we do is give back to our community. We did that. One of the things that I remember is doing Easter baskets. During these Easter baskets and putting them together, it made me feel normal in the sense that I knew that I was giving back to a child. I knew that a smile was placed on their heart. I knew a family was smiling and being thankful for what we're able to contribute, and I felt normal.
Being in prison, you don't think about putting on a play like Cuckoo's Nest, but working with DU Pi, that's what we're doing. And now we're no longer just a name, just a number. We're normal people doing normal things that you would do if you were inside the world.
Lieutenant Night Guard, she puts on these special visits, reunification visits. And I got to hug my little girl and gave her a piggyback ride around the whole visiting room like never before. That gave me so much hope and it changed my mind in so many ways. It's a very special thing when you get to be with your little girl like that. Stuff that's never been done before.
I'm at Sterling Correctional Facility right now from DRDC. They brought me on a business trip. I feel like a real human. I mean, the trip is something special because they treated me normal. And in prison, that's not normal.
Christmas in June was a big event we had here. Where we had the slip and slide, dunk tanks, food, carnival type atmosphere. Man, and it's been about 27 years since I went down a slip and slide, and I felt like a kid again, man.
I spent the last 20 years in prison, living an institutional life, and now I finally feel like a normal man, able to get up and go to work doing something I love every day, learning a skill that I can get out and take with me. And just everything that's going on in prison these days is changing the way we do time and the way that we're able to learn and better ourselves. Before, under the old way of thinking, there was none of this. Now that things are starting to change, it's just opened up our eyes to how we can grow as individuals and spend time doing what we love while still learning and growing. And that's what I love about waking up every morning. Used to, I would want to sleep all day and just do my prison time and make the days go by and not have a life. Now I want to enjoy my life while I'm here and build upon the man that I am for when I get out.
Once again, I'd like to thank all those who helped me better understand the prison system in Colorado and the impact that security threat groups have on the state. I'd like to give another shout out to Sting, who continues to educate officers and the public on these important issues. From their beginning origins until now, street and prison gangs have become more violent, more organized, and are bigger than ever in the pintas as well as out on the streets. Much of the information of this Part 2 video can be found in a book written with my brother from another mother, Steve Lucero, called From Canalismo to Chaos, Chicano Gangs and History of the Southwest U.S., available on Amazon.com and other platforms. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.